A lot of people believe that after a person passes away, their nails continue to grow long and strong, just like bamboo. But is this true or false? In today's episode, we are gonna find out. So make sure to watch till the end. Number 10. Long and lonesome. Back in the 1800s, there was a famous circus performer named General Tom Thumb. He was an entertainer who would travel around the world performing different acts, and he was known for his short stature and his unusually long fingernails. People would pay admission for the circus by bringing a quart of wheat or a quart of corn and then trading it for a ticket. And General Tom Thumb had everyone fooled because he would use a nail clipper to cut his fingernails and then eat them. The audience thought that his nails were growing at an unnatural rate, but in reality, he was just eating them. Nowadays, you can still see his preserved fingernails at the National Museum of Funeral History in Houston, Texas. They look real, but they aren't. They're actually made from the fingernails of other people. Number 9. The new kid on the block. There are so many different things that can cause your nails to grow, including vitamins and food, which is something that most people don't know about. When you pass away, your body doesn't receive any more nutrients, so you can't grow any longer. But when you're alive, you have all these different things in your body that produce substances that help your nails grow. When you're dead, though, these processes stop. This means that if you get a manicure while you're alive, your nails will grow, but once you die, they'll stop. On top of this, your hair and nails are made up of keratin, and when you pass away, your body stops producing keratin, too. So overall, no, your nails do not continue to grow after you die. Number 8. Living dead. A few years ago, a coffin was being lowered into the ground during a funeral in Taiwan when suddenly the lid flew open and the corpse reached out with a finger. The entire crowd gasped as the dead man's finger moved. It was clear that he was still alive, even though he had been declared dead already. At first, some people said that this was because of the heat, but that isn't true. When the coroner tried to check for a pulse, they found one. So they brought him back to the hospital where he lived for another 4 days before passing away again. So what did this have to do with nail growth? Well, when he went to the hospital the second time, doctors gave him a physical examination and found that his nails had grown quite a bit since he was last examined. In fact, each of his fingernails had grown about 2 centimeters, which is over half an inch. Now, this is an interesting phenomenon because it shows that even if you are close to death, your nails can still grow. It's probably because when you're in a hospital, you're getting a lot more nutrition than if you were just lying around dead. Of course, this doesn't mean that he wasn't dead the first time, but it does show that if you get really sick, your body will try anything to keep itself alive. Number 7. Dead man walking. Another story about a man who came back from the dead comes from the Dominican Republic, where a boy was walking home one day when he saw a group of men carrying a coffin. They had made a mistake and put the wrong date on the coffin, so now they were going to bury someone who was still alive. The men were shocked and confused, but eventually they took the body out of the coffin and let it go free. This man had been sentenced to death for murder, but obviously this was a mistake and he didn't deserve to be killed. Once he got away, he hid in the jungle for several months until he was finally found and taken back to prison. Now, here's where the nails come in. While he was hiding in the jungle, this man ate mostly fruits and vegetables. Even though he didn't have access to protein, his fingernails continued to grow long and strong. When he was finally found and brought back to prison, people noticed that his nails had grown over half an inch. Number 6. Not quite dead yet. There are so many different stories about people who were declared dead but then came back to life that it's hard to believe. One of the most famous cases happened in 1998 when a woman in New York was pronounced dead after suffering a heart attack. Her family started making arrangements for her funeral, but then they got a call from her son saying she wasn't dead. The thing is, when she was first pronounced dead, doctors did all the necessary tests and they couldn't find a pulse. Eventually, her family agreed to let the doctors perform an autopsy, but before they could do this, her son called again. He told them that his mother was trying to get out of bed and that she needed their help immediately. When the family rushed back to her house, they found that she was sitting up in bed with her eyes open and staring straight ahead. She didn't say anything or respond to them, but she did move her lips slightly as if she was trying to speak. Doctors were called back in, and this time they checked her vital signs and found that she was indeed alive. However, she did have brain damage due to lack of oxygen. So basically, she became a vegetable. Number 5. Playing dead. Have you ever heard of someone who pretended to be dead in order to avoid a funeral? Well, if you haven't, there's a good chance you will at some point in your life. One of the most famous cases happened in Georgia when a man who was supposed to be buried alive managed to escape his coffin. He had hired someone to dig the hole for him, but then he changed his mind and decided that he didn't want to be buried yet. The only problem is, his family and friends showed up to the funeral with a shovel. Fortunately, this man had prepared for this and he had written down instructions for how to dig up his body if he wasn't actually dead. His friends and family followed the instructions and were able to locate him. To this day, no one knows why this man pretended to be dead. Some people say it was because he was sick of his life, while others say he just wanted to play a prank on his loved ones. Number 4. Coffin surprise. Back in 1983, 2 men were working in a quarry in Italy when they heard some noise coming from inside an old abandoned mine. They went to investigate and what they found shocked them. One of the rocks had moved and underneath it was a human skeleton wearing a suit and a hat. As they dug further, they found out that the person had been buried alive. Someone had put a wooden cross over the entrance to the hole so that no one would accidentally stumble upon it. However, over time, the cross had fallen apart and the rocks had shifted, revealing the skeleton. These men had never seen anything like this before, so they called the police and told them about their discovery. It turned out that this was the skeleton of a man who had been buried alive over 100 years ago. During World War I, there were so many casualties that sometimes bodies would be thrown into mass graves. It's believed that this man was one of the victims. Number 3. Buried alive. Speaking of being buried alive, there are so many cases of this happening that it's scary. One of the most famous cases happened in 1991 when a woman in California was mistakenly buried alive. Her name was Mary Winkler, and she had gone to the hospital for a routine operation. But unfortunately, she was given an overdose of anesthesia and died. Her family was devastated, but they went ahead with the funeral. Then, 3 days later, they started to notice a strange smell coming from inside the coffin. When they opened it up, they found that Mary was still alive, but she had managed to claw her way out. She was taken back to the hospital where she recovered and lived for another 26 years. Number 2. The case of the growing fingernail. There are so many strange and mysterious things that happen to our bodies when we die, and one of the most interesting is the growth of fingernails. For example, in 2011, a young girl in China passed away from leukemia. After she was cremated, her parents noticed that her fingernails had grown quite a bit. It turns out that when you're cremated, the heat causes your skin to contract, which makes it seem like your nails are growing. Number 1. Sleeping Beauty. One of the most famous stories about someone who was mistakenly buried alive comes from France in the 19th century. A young woman named Marie Delphine Macquart was suffering from tuberculosis, so her doctor recommended that she spend some time in a tomb to rest. Unfortunately, she ended up spending much more time in the tomb than she had planned. After spending several weeks underground, people started to notice that her fingernails were growing at an unnatural rate. By the time they finally opened the tomb, her nails had grown over an inch. Now you need to watch. Do you really become a vampire after you die? Or check out what happens to your body in a coffin.